Anatomy time. This is the pectoralis major, serratus anterior, external oblique, rectus abdominis, sternocleidomastoid, trapezius. Wait, stop!
Oh my god!
There are so many muscles. This is overwhelming. Are you really supposed to remember this? Kinda. But wait, you don't actually have to remember them all right now. In fact, depending on your art style or what you plan to do, you might not even have to remember them at all. But if you're determined to learn them, I'm going to show you some steps you can take to make it easier. I'm going to take you through 4 levels of anatomy to demonstrate how you can build up your knowledge gradually, instead of having to memorize, well, all of this right away. Hopefully, you'll be able to have fun along the way. If you're just getting started trying to draw more anatomical figures, sometimes the best way to get started is to break down the human body into simpler shapes. One thing to keep in mind is that the human body is very complicated, and there are an infinite number of ways to simplify it. Use whatever method works for you. I'll tell you how I like to do it, but you might like to do it differently, and that's fine. Draw the head as a cylinder. The ribcage and pelvis can be represented as rectangular prisms. I like to use spheres to represent the various joints, such as the shoulders, elbows, and knees. The limbs themselves look like cylinders. We could draw the feet as these little triangular blocks and the hands as, I don't know, blobs. Hands are hard, okay? We'll worry about them later. But you can see how flexible the sort of very super simple mannequin is, right? I feel like I can achieve a lot just by drawing these boxes. It's about the orientation of your blocks. If you're making, this one's a little stiffer because I make my blocks kind of stiff and a little bit parallel, whereas these ones are more rotated and a little bit loose. Anyway, these are very simple shapes, but put them all together and they give the impression of being a human body already. You can actually go really far with something like this. When you're trying to figure out a tricky pose or perspective, this super simple mannequin is actually surprisingly effective. Once you get comfortable with the simple shapes, we can start smoothing it out and making it look more like a human being. Instead of drawing the head as a simple cylinder, we can break it down a little further by adding an elongated sphere so it looks more like a skull. You can also use a Loomis head if you're into that. For those of you that aren't familiar with Loomis heads, it's a popular way of simplifying the structure of the head. I like to widen the torso to also include the muscles of the back, then I start drawing lines to connect up these individual boxes so it looks more like a human body. As for the pelvis itself, I personally like keeping it as a box because it lets me figure out the orientation more easily. But I know a lot of people that like to draw the pelvis as a bucket. It's up to you. You can also start cutting out portions of your box or bucket to make attachment points for the legs. It looks a little like a pair of underwear. As for the limbs, we can start adjusting the width of the cylinders to make it look more natural. It makes sense to widen it where there's more muscle, such as at the shoulder or near the elbow. The joints themselves tend to have less surrounding fat and muscle, so we can keep those a little thinner. How many muscles can I name in this model? I didn't draw any muscles in. None! Okay, it's time to learn the actual muscles. Here they are. Yeah, at this point, there's no real way around it anymore. It's time to start memorizing. Okay, so I'm not gonna go over each individual bone and muscle here because I think there are resources that do a far better job than I can. But I'm gonna tell you which ones I used and the process I used to teach myself. I started with this book, Figure Drawing, Design and Invention by Michael Hampton. As a beginner, I really liked how 1, it breaks down each muscle group into simple and understandable shapes, and 2, it starts with important prerequisites such as form and gesture. I think these are important to cover before starting to learn the actual anatomy. I confess I kinda ignored the head section in this book because I just wanted to draw anime faces, so yeah. Another great resource I really like is Anatomy for Sculptors. It's a very visual guide to the body with lots of diagrams and not too much text. It's great if you're a visual learner. I don't know about you guys, but just looking at diagrams or watching YouTube videos, including this one, by the way, it doesn't help me learn. By actually copying out each diagram, I am forcing myself to carefully observe and understand what I'm looking at. I have links to these 2 books in the description, so please go check them out. And these are not the only good resources out there. I'm sure there are many amazing artists who have made many amazing tutorials and books out there, but these are just the one that personally worked for me. If you know any particularly good ones, please feel free to share in the comments. I'm gonna go find some reference. I think there's a website called Free Photo Muscle, which is one of my favorite places to find references because, all right, cooking class. Macho typing at high speed. You wonder why I like this website? I don't know why. It's a mystery to me as well. Hey, listen, we're doing anatomy studies, and if you want to learn to draw, you need to draw from reference, okay? One more thing that you might be wondering is, do you really have to memorize the names of each of these muscles? I'd say, not really. Personally, knowing the name helps me remember the muscle. And when I want to talk about anatomy with my fellow nerd artists, it's easier to say the actual name of the muscle instead of trying to vaguely describe it by saying something like, that cool twisty muscle on the arm. Actually, that muscle is called the brachioradialis, and it also happens to be my favorite muscle. Just look how cool it is. Okay, so let's say you're done with all of that. You've learnt where all the muscles go. Is that it? Are you an anatomy master now? Are you done? Nope. In fact, you're just getting started. Alright, maybe you won't have this problem, but I find that after a while, I'll start to forget some of the stuff I've learned. And I think that's normal. I've had to go back and study the same bits of anatomy over and over again, but each time I add to my understanding, and I remember a little bit more. Here are some additional exercises that I found are pretty useful for hammering in the information. Of course, you don't have to do all or even any of them, but maybe you'll find them useful too. So far, we've been drawing an awful lot of skinless people with muscles. The fancy art people call this an écorché, by the way, which means skinned in French. People obviously don't actually look like this because they have skin. So looking at photos and tracing where those muscles are is a useful exercise to see how muscles actually look in reality. You can also do this for the skeleton. And of course, drawing from reference. Alright, macho harvesting kiwi. Just gathering references, don't mind me. No, I promise you, I love studying anatomy. Anatomy is like my favorite thing to study, dude. Why am I being doubted? You guys know I take my studies super seriously, right? Ah, anatomy. But don't just copy blindly. When you draw a curve, for instance, try to figure out which muscle is actually causing that curve. I also find it helpful to simply put my favorite character's head on top of these studies. Here's my original character. He's basically a bunny dude that doesn't wear a shirt. So, yeah, I'm just gonna draw his head on all of these bodies, and that, for some reason, just makes me feel very motivated to do more anatomy studies. Very mysterious. I wonder why that works, huh? This next exercise is something I've recently started doing, but if you want to be able to draw something from any angle, first you gotta know what it looks like from every angle. For an extra hard mode version of this, you can try drawing it from memory, then checking a reference to see if you're right. Having a 3D model for this exercise is really helpful. Okay, so what I'm about to tell you next is the most important step. Do not miss it. You need to draw for fun. Yes, really. You have to take all this information that you've learned about anatomy and learn to apply it in your actual work. Surely you don't want to be drawing skinless people forever, right? So how do you do that? What you might need to do is slow down and stop autopiloting. If you've been drawing for a while, there's probably a specific way you like to draw certain things, like arms and torsos. But now you've learned new information about these things. So instead of drawing them as you always do, try to include this new information in your drawing. I find that when you're first starting out, it's helpful to sketch in every single muscle to force yourself to think about them. You can always omit these lines during the line art process or just erase them. When you get more accustomed to it, you'll be able to skip the step. But it's really useful when you're first starting out. What's also cool about drawing for fun is that it's a really good test to find out which parts you're struggling with the most. And after you find out, you have a good subject for your next study session. No, I need to learn how they move first before I can draw them appealingly, because, I don't know what I'm doing right now. I find this loop of study, draw for fun, and then study again really, really effective. You start by studying something, and then testing yourself by drawing from imagination. You find out what your weaknesses are, and then study again. And this whole time, you get to have fun by getting better and better at the things you love to draw. Okay, so now let's say you've done every exercise lots of times, and you've perfectly memorized the position and shape of every muscle. Now are you done? Now are you an anatomy master? Ha! You thought! Not even close. See, the funny thing about art is that you can always keep going deeper. There is, in fact, no finish line. And the more realistically you want to draw, the more important it is for you to have even more in-depth knowledge. Here's some examples of stuff you can dive into. the actual direction of the muscle fibers, learning the actual origin and insertion points of the muscles. This means you gotta get really familiar with the shape of the bones. Get ready to get really comfy with the word epicondyle, which is a really fancy way of saying bump, because there sure are a lot of bumps on the bones. You can also learn how the muscles change shape when they move, what each muscle is responsible for. To be honest, if you hit the gym with any regularity, you probably know this stuff, but if you're a couch potato like me, you're gonna have to go and learn this. And there's probably much more than this too. It's not like the muscles on the surface are the only ones you can see. There are also muscles below these muscles that also affect the shape of the body. If you're interested in this kind of detail, a really good resource to check out would be Proko's YouTube channel. You probably already know about him, but I'll leave a link in the description just in case. So anyway, if you thought there was a certain point where you could say you were finished learning anatomy, well, there isn't. The path to mastery is in fact infinite, and that's what makes it so fun. So this video wasn't exactly an anatomy video. I'm not really trying to teach anyone anatomy, but I'm trying to teach people to teach themselves anatomy. I hope it was helpful for you, and let me know if there's anything else you'd like to see from me. Thanks for watching. Bye? Yeah, okay, I'm done. Get super